Oklahoma talk this week is about comings and goings. Will Sam stay? What about that defensive tackle who's decided to come to Norman? And will the Sooner offense know whether it's coming or going against the Gator defense? From the Dodge Sports Desk, I'm Jenny Carlson, and this is OU Football with Jake Trotter. All right, Jake, let's talk first about some news that broke over the weekend. In an interview with ESPN, Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, says that the rookie pay scale will for sure stay in place until 2011, meaning that high draft picks, at least in the immediate future, are going to still receive those same big deals that we've seen for the last several decades. What impact could this have on Sam Bradford, who's considering jumping to the NFL?
Well, if anything, it doesn't help his chances of staying, because now it takes the fact that you lose money by staying in school either way off the table. Because if let's say that they had installed a rookie salary cap, in 2010, then if he would have stayed to his junior year and come out, he would have received significantly less money for being a first-round pick. So now he can just evaluate, where am I going to go? What kind of money am I going to get? Do I have a chance to go higher if I stay? What are the values of staying in college another year or two? So, we don't know what he's going to do at this point, and I don't think he really knows maybe either, but definitely doesn't hurt his chances of staying.
Let's say he's projected to be a top 15 pick, maybe even a top 10 pick. Does all this talk of money, will that ultimately weigh heavy, or at that point does it just become about, do I want to roll the dice and come back? Do I like school that much? Does the money sort of almost exit the equation in some ways?
Well, if you're the first quarterback taken, you make a significant amount. If you're the fourth quarterback taken, there's a big drop-off, and I think it's going to come down to that. Where does he fit in with the other quarterbacks? We saw Matt Ryan, cash in for a huge deal. He's going to win NFC Rookie of the Year. Had a great season, led his team to the playoffs. So, Bradford can look at that example like, wow, I could probably do this, because I think Bradford may end up being as good a pro prospect as Matt Ryan was coming out of BC. But on the other hand, too, if he does not sure about where he's going to go, then there are benefits to coming back and staying.
I know this is a story you'll continue to follow, but one that's jumped onto the radar, too, this weekend is a guy who's committed to the Sooners. Jamarcus McFarland, a five-star defensive tackle from Lufkin, Texas, announces that he's going to be a Sooner, picks OU over Texas. This was a recruiting battle, but then out of nowhere, it becomes a soap opera. What's going on with this guy?
Well, Thayer Evans from the New York Times, who covers the Big 12 and more specifically OU in Texas, has chronicled McFarland's recruitment for 6 months with stories here and there about what he's going through, and came out with a bombshell on Christmas Day on their internet, which basically said that there was some improprieties going on via the University of Texas, in that Texas people not affiliated with the university, but boosters or fans or whatever you want to call them, were promising gifts to the McFarland family if Jamarcus would go to Texas. At one point, a former classmate who was a Texas fan had worked out a deal where Jamarcus's mother would get any kind of loan she wanted from a banker if her son went to Texas. So, and then on top of that, too, there were some interesting recruiting stories about a stretch limo being rented by USC players after the Notre Dame win to a party, and then at LSU, on his official visit, there were hostesses sitting on the laps of all the prospects, which is kind of eerie, so or creepy, I guess is a better word. So anyway, interesting. Doesn't make them all true necessarily just because they said it, or there might be a degree of truth because it really didn't comment on the other side. Texas, LSU, USC really weren't given a chance to comment, and I'm sure they either will if they feel they need to or won't. But it'll be interesting to see what comes of it.
Well, what could come of it? Could the NCAA get involved with some of this?
Well, maybe so. I mean, the NCAA is kind of fickle. You don't really know how they're going to approach stuff. They probably could have investigated USC for a number of things over the years and really haven't. But the Texas thing raises some red flags about people promising things to recruits for going to that university. And I think that's obviously a violation of NCAA rules. And, as we saw with Oklahoma a few years ago, Rhett Bomar, he was getting money for work he didn't do, and it's kind of the same thing.
Let's turn our attention away from the soap opera for a second and talk about this guy as a player. Five-star defensive tackle, talked about as one of the best, if not the best, defensive player in Texas. How much of an impact could this guy have, and how quickly could he have an impact for the Sooners?
Well, Gerald McCoy was the Defensive Player of the Year in the entire nation, and he redshirted as a freshman. It'll kind of depend where their depth is at defensive tackle after this year. Mainly, does McCoy come back? If he comes back, you have Granger, you have Adrian Taylor. You'll have Stacey McGee out of Muskogee coming up, so you might be okay there. But he is a very talented player. Really completes this defensive class because they already had a bunch of defensive backs, linebackers, and defensive ends, and now they have a defensive tackle. It's an outstanding defensive class and the complete one of that.
Well, aside from talk about Sam Bradford, Jamarcus McFarland, oh yeah, there's a football game that's going to be played here in about 2 weeks. Sooners playing for a national championship. Let's turn our attention a little bit to this matchup between the Florida defense and the Oklahoma offense. There continue to be these comments made by the Florida folks saying, hey, the SEC defenses are different than Big 12 defenses. How much of a difference could we see between what Oklahoma has faced all year and what they're going to face with Florida?
Well, I think it's the best defense Oklahoma will have faced all year. You know, Texas is a nice team, but they're nowhere near the level of Florida is. I mean, you're talking about a top 5 defense nationally, even playing in the SEC where the offenses aren't all that great. On the flip side, this is going to be the best offense Florida has faced all year. So it'll be interesting to see how they react. You know, I was on a radio show the other day talking about, you know, are the Big 12 offenses any good? I think we're going to find out on both sides. Des Bryant at the National Board said he's looking forward to this game because he thinks this will reveal how good the Big 12 is in comparison to the SEC. And so, especially the Big 12 offenses versus the SEC defense. It's going to be a big game for that, not only for the two teams, but conference supremacy.
Is there any area in particular that may determine who gets the better of this matchup between OU's offense and Florida's defense? Is it the lines? Is it the wide receivers versus the DBs? Is there an area where we may see this matchup swing?
Oh, I always think turnovers can really play a big part. You know, if OU gets into turnover mode, which they haven't done all year, then I think you'll see Florida really coast. On the flip side, defensively for Oklahoma, they've been so good at creating turnovers that against a team that has done, you know, Tebow's done 2 interceptions all year. So turnovers are going to be big in this game. The last 4 games have been decided by turnover margin. The team with the fewest turnovers has won. And I think this will probably be along the same lines.
All right. Well, Jake's going to continue to provide in-depth coverage of the Sooners as they continue gearing up for the national championship game. To follow all the news and analysis, stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.